everyone, I'm Michel Akkad, Medical Director of Athletic Heart of San Francisco. Thank you for joining me. Today I'd like to talk about high blood pressure management. And I want to do this because I think this is an area where there's a lot of confusion, even among doctors. In the last few years, there have been several studies and recommendations that have conflicted with one another about what constitutes high blood pressure and how to best approach it and so forth. So I will take a few minutes to talk about what high blood pressure is, why there is so much confusion about it, and what I think is the best approach to deal with this problem. So as you know, the blood circulates in the body and it moves inside of blood vessels, which are like tubes, under the action of the heart, which is like a pump. And anytime you have a fluid that moves through tubes, it exerts a certain pressure against the walls of those tubes. So the blood exerts a certain pressure against the walls of the blood vessels, and that's what is the blood pressure. Because the heart pumps in a pulsatile fashion, meaning it squeezes and relaxes, and it squeezes and relaxes, and it squeezes and relaxes, then the pressure inside the blood vessels goes up and down and up and down and up and down, with the peak being the pressure immediately after the heart squeezes, and the valley being at the end when the heart is relaxed before the next heartbeat. So that's why when we talk about blood pressure, we talk about two numbers. For example, we may say that the blood pressure is 130/70. So the top number, 130, is immediately after the heart squeezes, and the bottom number, 75 or 70, is when the heart is relaxed. So that's the blood pressure. Now, it's clear that when if the blood pressure is too high, and it really doesn't matter whether it's the top number or the bottom number, over time this will cause damage to a number of organs. It will cause damage to the blood vessels themselves. It will make them stiffer. It will cause damage to the heart, and it can affect the kidneys, and it can affect the brain. So high blood pressure is the most important contributor to stroke, heart failure, kidney disease, and other very serious complications. So we absolutely want to do everything we can to avoid those complications. So the difficulty with the high blood pressure is to try to decide when is a high blood pressure too high. And the confusion, I think, comes if we focus too much on a particular number. For example, if we say that high blood pressure is 140/90, that means that we say that anything above that is abnormal and anything below that is normal. Well, that's actually not quite the case. You see, the blood pressure, first of all, changes all the time. My blood pressure right now may be, let's say, 130/70, but if I get startled and very nervous, or if I'm anxious or stressed out, it may be higher than that. If I have a meal that is very heavy, when I digest, my blood pressure may actually go lower. If I'm sleeping, the blood pressure will be lower, and so forth. And it changes all the time. In fact, if you plot the blood pressure in a 24-hour period, the difference between the lower value and the highest value may be double. So it really varies all the time from moment to moment. And you may have had that experience yourself when you go to the doctor. They may measure the blood pressure one time, and then a few minutes later they measure it again, and it's something completely different. So that's one problem. We know also that people's blood pressure tends to be higher when they go to the doctor, and that is called white coat hypertension. That's why I'm not wearing a white coat today. I want to put you at ease. So white coat hypertension is a problem because it may overestimate the blood pressure. But there's actually the reverse finding as well. There are some people who, when they go to the doctor, the blood pressure seems to be okay, but when they're at home or at work or up and about, their blood pressure is actually higher, and that is called masked hypertension. It's called masked because the doctor doesn't know about it. He or she may think that the blood pressure is okay, but in fact, if you take it on average, it is higher. So those are difficulties with deciding what a high blood pressure is. A more important difficulty is the fact that there's no actual cutoff line in the blood pressure, meaning that the risk of complications long term is really gradual. The higher the blood pressure, the higher the risk. There's no real cutoff point that can separate people who are normal, so to speak, from people who have high blood pressure per se. And so the number that we come up with, for example, 140/90, is really an artificial number. It's picked out of convenience by doctors, who decide, that this is a reasonable risk for people to take. But it's not. It doesn't represent any kind of physiologic reality. So how do we get around this confusion? Well, in my opinion, the key is to recognize that different people will react differently to the blood pressure. And it's not the number itself that's important, is how the organs are reacting to a given blood pressure. For example, for one person, a blood pressure of 150 may be very well tolerated, and his kidneys, his blood vessels, his heart, will continue for many years to do just fine. For another person, a blood pressure of 150 may be too much, and you will start seeing a stiffening of the heart and a stiffening of the blood vessels. So the key is to pay attention to the organs and to monitor, to examine them. And if you find that the heart and the kidneys and the blood vessels are in good health, then you may be okay monitoring things and not starting an aggressive treatment. If, on the other hand, you start seeing that the heart size is enlarging a little bit, that the kidneys are not working as well, and that sort of thing, then it may be just giving you an indication that the blood pressure is probably taking a toll, and you want to be more aggressive and take care of things. And I want to say that I'm not for or against medication, treating with medications. Or I think what we want to do is do the right thing. We want to minimize exposure to medications when it's not necessary. On the other hand, we don't want to stand around and just wait while the blood pressure is taking its toll on the organs. So we want to act, and do the right thing at the right time. So in summary, hypertension is a very common condition that affects millions of people and can have very serious consequences. But to focus too much on arbitrary cutoff numbers to determine what is normal and what is abnormal is not the way to go. Instead, we should use the tools that are available to us to examine the organs that are affected by the blood pressure and tailor our treatment accordingly. I hope you have found this episode useful, and as always, the show notes will contain the transcripts of the episode along with other informative links. And until next time, be healthy and be well. Thank you very much.